He saved her from drowning, but what they discovered that night changed the whole Wild West forever. Cattle wandered slowly near the outskirts, their soft lowing blending with the occasional clang of a metal bucket and the distant whistle of a train far beyond the hills. Life in Ridge moved slowly, but the people who lived there were used to the rhythm of hard work and simple pleasures. Among them was Elias Harper, a young man in his early 20s with broad shoulders, strong arms, and an unshakable sense of responsibility. He had spent most of his life on the Harper Ranch, helping his family tend to cattle, repair fences, and manage the small farm that had been in the family for generations. He had always been careful and cautious, but he was also known for his courage when the situation demanded it. That afternoon, Elias was working along the riverbank. He had been repairing a fence that had been damaged in the spring floods. The river, wide and powerful, cut through the town's outskirts, its water moving swiftly over smooth stones. It was a lifeline for the town, providing water for the animals and the crops, but it was also dangerous, especially after a sudden rainfall upriver. Elias had grown up near the river and knew its moods well. He respected it and kept a careful eye on it, especially after the rain had made the currents stronger than usual. As he tightened the last post of the fence, a sudden, panicked scream cut through the calm afternoon. Elias' head snapped up and his heart pounded in his chest. The scream was coming from the river. Without thinking twice, he dropped the hammer and sprinted toward the sound. There, just a few feet from the water's edge, he saw a young woman struggling violently against the current. Her arms flailed, and the water pulled at her dress, dragging her closer to the deeper, more dangerous part of the river. Panic filled her face, and the terror in her eyes made Elias' stomach twist. Without hesitation, he ran faster, reaching the edge of the riverbank. He could feel the wet earth slide beneath his boots as he leaped into the water. The river was colder than he expected, and the current tried to push him back, but he swam toward her with all his strength. The struggle was intense. Every movement required effort and precision. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward him, but the water was relentless. Her hair stuck to her face and she gasped for breath, coughing and sputtering. Elias spoke to her firmly but gently, trying to calm her. "Hold on, I've got you, just keep moving toward me." His voice carried over the roar of the river. Slowly, with determined effort, he guided her toward the shallower part of the river. Each step was a battle against the current, but he never let go of her hand. Finally, they reached a part of the river where the water barely reached his knees. He pulled her onto the bank, both of them panting and soaked to the bone. The woman collapsed on the grass, shivering violently. Elias knelt beside her, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders to offer some warmth. She lifted her head and looked at him, her eyes wide with shock and gratitude. Thank you," she stammered, her voice trembling. I thought I was done for." Elias smiled softly, brushing wet hair from his face. "You're safe now. Just take a few deep breaths and calm down. The river can be dangerous if you don't respect it." The woman tried to sit up but shivered so violently that Elias gently helped her lie back down. "I'm Clara Whitmore," she said finally, her voice regaining some strength. "I was traveling, heading to the next town over when my horse spooked and I fell into the river. I didn't think anyone was around to help me." Elias nodded, still keeping an eye on the river, which now reflected the warm colors of the sunset. "I'm Elias Harper. You're lucky I was nearby. This river can be unforgiving." As the two of them sat on the bank, drying off and catching their breath, a few townspeople began to gather at a distance. They had seen the commotion and whispered to each other about the bravery of the young man who had risked his life to save a stranger. Rumors spread quickly in small towns like Ridge, and soon people were talking about Elias and the mysterious woman he had saved. Clara slowly regained her composure. She looked around at the quiet town, taking in the simple buildings and the wide-open spaces. She had traveled through many places, but there was something different about Ridge. It felt honest and unpretentious. There was no pretense, no false grandeur, just people living their lives as best they could. Elias noticed the curiosity in her eyes and offered a small smile. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" he asked gently. Clara hesitated. "I was planning to keep moving, but I'm not sure I can make it after that fall. The river took most of my strength." Elias thought for a moment, then stood. "You can stay at my place tonight. It's not much, but it's safe and dry. I can make a fire and we can get you warmed up." Clara's eyes softened and she nodded. "Thank you. That's very kind of you." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elias helped Clara to his cabin, a modest wooden structure near the edge of his family's property. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs. He started a fire in the small hearth, and the flames cast warm, dancing shadows across the room. Clara sat near the fire, rubbing her hands together to warm them. Elias fetched a blanket for her and offered a simple meal of bread and cheese. As they ate in quiet companionship, Clara told Elias a little about her journey. She had been traveling alone, moving from town to town, helping her family deliver goods and letters. She had learned to be careful and independent, but she had not expected the river to become such a challenge. Elias listened attentively, impressed by her courage and resilience. Despite the warmth of the fire and the comfort of the cabin, both felt a lingering tension in the air. There was a sense that their meeting had been more than just coincidence. The river had brought them together, but somehow both sensed that something bigger was at play, something neither of them fully understood yet. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and the river murmured softly in the background. Inside, Elias and Clara shared stories and laughter, each feeling a quiet connection growing between them. The night stretched on, and the stars began to fill the sky, twinkling like tiny diamonds over the vast landscape of the Wild West. Elias felt a strange sense of anticipation. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that this night, this rescue, was the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. Clara, too, felt it, a mix of relief, curiosity, and the faint thrill of adventure. Neither of them realized that the events of that evening would set in motion discoveries and challenges that no one in Ridge, or anywhere else, could have imagined. By the time the fire burned low, and the cabin was quiet except for the occasional crackle of the hearth, both Elias and Clara were exhausted but content. They had survived a dangerous encounter with nature, and in doing so, had formed a bond that went beyond words. The river, once a symbol of fear, had become a bridge connecting two strangers in a way that destiny seemed to have planned. Outside, the night deepened. The river flowed steadily, unaware of the human lives it had touched. And inside the small cabin, two souls sat together, sharing warmth, stories, and an unspoken understanding that their lives were no longer the same. Something had begun that night, something that would grow, challenge, and ultimately transform not only them, but the entire world around them. The night stretched on, and the stars shone brightly over Ridge. The river whispered secrets in its gentle current, secrets that only the brave, the kind, and the curious could ever hope to uncover. Elias and Clara slept that night with hearts full of hope, unaware of the adventure that awaited them but ready to face it together, whatever it might be. The morning sun rose slowly over Ridge, spilling warm light across the wooden rooftops and dirt streets. The town had already begun to stir. Horses neighed in the stables, the blacksmith's hammer rang against iron, and townsfolk walked briskly, carrying supplies or chatting quietly as they went about their daily chores. Elias Harper awoke to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the cabin window. He stretched and glanced toward Clara, who was still asleep on the small cot, wrapped in the blanket he had given her the night before. The events of the previous day, the river, the rescue, the fear, felt almost unreal now, yet the memory of her wide, terrified eyes haunted him. Elias went about his morning chores quietly, careful not to wake Clara. He brought in water from the nearby well, fed the small number of chickens in the yard, and stacked firewood neatly beside the cabin. Even as he worked, his mind kept wandering back to the river, to the danger Clara had faced, and to the strange sense of fate that had brought them together. It was unusual, he thought, for a stranger to enter your life in such a sudden, dramatic way, and yet there she was. Clara stirred as the sun climbed higher, blinking against the morning light. She sat up slowly, stretching her arms, and looked around the cabin. Everything smelled of wood and earth and the faint scent of the fire that had burned low through the night. She smiled softly at Elias, grateful not only for his rescue but for the quiet kindness he had shown her. "Good morning," she said, her voice still soft from sleep. "Good morning," Elias replied with a warm smile. "I hope you slept well. The river can leave quite an impression." Clara nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I did. I can't thank you enough for saving me. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't there." Elias shrugged modestly. "I was just in the right place at the right time. Anyone would have done the same." After breakfast, Elias and Clara stepped outside to enjoy the fresh morning air. The river flowed quietly now, its waters shimmering under the sunlight. Elias noticed Clara's gaze lingering on the far side of the river, where trees grew densely and shadows stretched across the banks. "You're staring at the river," he said. "It's calm now, but it can turn dangerous in an instant." Clara's eyes were thoughtful. "I was thinking last night when I fell in, I felt something strange, almost like the river itself. I don't know, warning me or guiding me somehow." Elias considered her words. There was something unusual in her tone, a mix of awe and concern. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but he felt a flicker of unease as he glanced at the flowing water. Nature, he knew, could be unpredictable. As they began to plan the day, Clara mentioned that she had been traveling with a small wagon, carrying personal belongings and family items that were important to her. "I was hoping to reach the next town by tomorrow," she said, "but I may need to rest here for a day or two." Elias offered to help her secure the wagon. "We can store it near the edge of the property," he said. "It'll be safe there, and you can rest without worrying about it." Clara agreed, and together they walked to the spot where her wagon had been left the previous day. The sun was now higher, casting long shadows as they moved through the tall grass. When they reached the wagon, Clara noticed something unusual: faint scratches and symbols etched into the wooden beams of the wagon. She knelt down, brushing away dust and dirt to examine them more closely. Elias peered over her shoulder. "I've never seen anything like that before. What do you think it means?" Clara's brow furrowed. "I'm not sure, but they look deliberate. Someone must have carved them for a reason." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. Ridge was a quiet town, and symbols like these were not common. It was possible that they were merely old markings left by a previous owner, but something about them felt different, urgent, almost secretive. Clara looked uneasy as she studied the carvings, sensing that they were more than just random scratches. "I think we should keep an eye on them," she said quietly. "They might lead to something or warn us of something." Elias nodded. He was used to dealing with practical matters, but the idea that there could be hidden messages or secrets in his otherwise simple town intrigued him. They decided to return to the cabin and discuss what to do next. Back at the cabin, the two of them sat by the fire, the flickering flames casting moving shadows on the walls. Clara unfolded a map she had kept in her wagon, spreading it across the table. She traced her finger along the roads and landmarks she had traveled. "I've been following this route for days," she explained. "It's mostly ordinary, but there are a few places marked, unusual places. Old mines, abandoned settlements, and small caves." Elias leaned closer, studying the map. "Do you think the symbols on the wagon could be connected to one of these places?" Clara nodded slowly. "It's possible. I've heard stories of hidden treasures, secret passages, and places where people tried to hide things long ago." Most of it is just legend, but sometimes legends have a kernel of truth. Elia's curiosity grew. He had spent his life in Ridge, following routines and rules, and yet here was a mystery unfolding before him. The combination of the river rescue, the strange symbols, and Clara's story suggested that something unusual was about to happen. As the day passed, they prepared for a small journey. Clara wanted to inspect some of the areas marked on her map, while Elias agreed to accompany her. They gathered supplies, lanterns, ropes, food, and water, careful to be ready for whatever they might encounter. Before they left, Elias walked outside for a moment, looking at the river. The water sparkled under the afternoon sun, calm and inviting, but he remembered the force it had held the day before. He shivered slightly at the memory of Clara's struggle, realizing how quickly life could change. And yet, he felt a quiet thrill, the kind that comes when one senses adventure on the horizon. When he returned inside, Clara was examining the lanterns, making sure they worked properly. Elias joined her, and they shared a brief smile. There was a sense of partnership forming between them, an unspoken agreement to face whatever lay ahead together. As twilight approached, they stepped outside, heading toward the first location on Clara's map. The woods were quiet, filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant calls of birds settling in for the night. Shadows grew longer, stretching across the uneven terrain. Every now and then, Elias would glance at Clara to make sure she was steady and safe, while she kept her eyes alert, scanning the environment for anything unusual. They reached a small clearing near the river, where an old, weathered cabin stood abandoned. Its walls were cracked, and the roof sagged under the weight of years. Elias felt a shiver of anticipation as they approached. The symbols from Clara's wagon seemed to echo in his mind, hinting that something important might be hidden nearby. Clara knelt near the cabin, brushing away dirt and debris. She discovered faint markings carved into the wooden beams, similar to the ones on her wagon. Her eyes widened. "Elias, look at this," she whispered. Elias examined the carvings, feeling a mix of excitement and caution. "This is definitely deliberate," he said. "Someone wanted these to be found, but only by the right person." A sense of mystery and purpose filled the air. The river, the symbols, the abandoned cabin, it all pointed to something larger than either of them could yet understand. And as darkness fell over the wild west town of Ridge, Elias and Clara realized that their journey was only beginning. That night, as they camped near the cabin, the stars above seemed to shine with a strange intensity, as if guiding them toward secrets long hidden and adventures yet to come. They talked quietly into the night, sharing thoughts and ideas, but also fears. Both sensed that the coming days would be filled with discovery, danger, and change, not just for them, but for everyone in the region. The river had brought them together, and now it seemed to guide them toward something extraordinary. As they finally settled down to sleep, the river whispered softly in the distance, carrying secrets of the past and promises of the future. Elias and Clara, unaware of exactly what awaited them, felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and determination. Something big was coming, something that could reshape not only their lives but the very world around them. And as the wind rustled through the trees and the stars watched silently from above, both knew that the night held mysteries that could not be ignored, and that the journey they had begun together would change everything. The morning air in Ridge was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth from the river that wound its way through the town. Birds called cheerfully from the treetops, and the soft clatter of wagon wheels in the distance signaled the start of another day. Elias Harper woke early, already thinking about the day ahead. He glanced at Clara, who was still asleep near the fire, her map spread out beside her, and felt a sense of anticipation he could not quite explain. The symbols on her wagon, the abandoned cabin, and the strange markings in the woods, they all hinted at something important, something that demanded investigation. After a simple breakfast of bread, cheese, and strong coffee, Elias and Clara set out toward the first location marked on her map. The path led them through thick woods, where sunlight struggled to reach the forest floor, and the scent of moss and damp leaves filled the air. Elias carried a small pack with provisions and tools, while Clara held the map carefully, her eyes scanning for landmarks. The silence of the forest was both peaceful and tense, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to find what lay hidden. Hours passed as they hiked deeper into the woods. The terrain grew rougher, with rocks and tree roots threatening to trip them at every step. Clara paused often, marking the trail and ensuring they did not lose their way. Elias admired her careful attention, noting how determined she was, even after the ordeal with the river. He felt a growing respect for her courage, realizing that her strength went far beyond what he had first seen. As afternoon approached, they arrived at a small, rocky hill near the riverbank. According to Clara's map, there was a cave hidden somewhere within the rocks, a place rumored to have been used by travelers and settlers long ago to hide valuables and secrets. The entrance was well concealed, overgrown with vines and hidden by boulders that had fallen over time. Clara knelt to brush away the debris, revealing faint carvings on the stone, symbols similar to those they had seen on her wagon and in the abandoned cabin. Elias crouched beside her, examining the carvings closely. "This isn't just coincidence," he said. "Someone wanted to hide something important here and they left clues to find it." Clara's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Then we have to see what's inside. We need to know what they were hiding and why it matters." Together, they cleared the remaining debris and carefully stepped into the cave. The air inside was cool and damp, carrying the earthy smell of stone and history. The light from their lanterns danced on the rough walls, revealing faint markings that guided them further in. The cave was narrow at first, forcing them to move slowly and cautiously, but soon it opened into a wider chamber. What they found inside took their breath away. The chamber was filled with objects that seemed to have been placed with care. Wooden crates, old chests, and bundles of parchment were stacked neatly in corners. Golden coins, jewelry, and other small treasures gleamed in the lantern light. But it was the papers that caught Clara's attention most of all. She carefully picked up a bundle of documents, unrolling them to reveal maps, letters, and records written in careful, precise handwriting. Elias looked over her shoulder. "These aren't just random papers. They're records of land, of ownership, and look at this. Secret agreements, old settlements, and claims that were never meant to be public." Clara's voice was hushed with awe. "These could change everything. If people in Redridge and the surrounding towns see these, it could reveal years of lies and corruption." Elias nodded slowly, feeling the weight of their discovery. The cave was more than just a hiding place for valuables. It was a vault of truth, preserving secrets that could reshape the region. He realized that they had stumbled upon something far bigger than they had imagined. As they carefully examined the documents, they began to piece together a story. Many of the papers detailed illegal land grabs by powerful men who had taken advantage of settlers, claiming property that did not belong to them. Others revealed secret deals and agreements that had gone unnoticed for decades, allowing a small group of influential people to control the towns and resources in the area. Elias felt a mix of anger and determination. The people of Redridge and neighboring towns had a right to know the truth, and it was up to him and Clara to make sure it was revealed. Hours passed as they sorted through the treasures and documents. They found maps showing hidden passages, old mines, and caves that could have been used for smuggling or secret meetings. Coins and jewelry suggested that wealth had been stored here for safety, likely taken from settlers or passed down in secrecy. Every item seemed to tell a story, and the more they uncovered, the more they realized how much had been hidden from the world. Clara paused, holding a small leather-bound journal. "Elias, This belongs to someone important. Look at the names and dates." These people weren't just hiding treasure, they were keeping records of everything that could change how towns were run. Elias took the journal and carefully flipped through the pages. He could see the care with which the entries were written, the way every detail had been recorded. "This is incredible," he said. "It's like a blueprint of the past, showing who did what and who was responsible. With this, we can expose the truth and make sure justice is served." As they continued to explore the chamber, Elias noticed a small, hidden compartment behind a loose stone in the wall. He carefully removed it, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Clara took them gently, her hands trembling slightly. These letters, they're personal. They could reveal motives, relationships, and secrets that were never meant to be known. The two of them sat together on a large rock in the chamber, going through the letters and documents with care. Each discovery added a new piece to the puzzle, revealing a web of corruption, greed, and secrecy that stretched across the region. Elias felt a surge of responsibility. It was not enough to simply find the hidden cave. They had to decide what to do with what they had uncovered. As evening approached, they realized it was time to return to Ridge. Carefully packing what they could carry, they left the cave, taking extra care to leave everything else undisturbed. The journey back through the woods was quiet, each of them lost in thought. The forest seemed different now, holding a weight of history and mystery that had been revealed to them alone. Once they reached the safety of the open fields near Ridge, Elias looked at Clara. "We've found something incredible," he said, "but we need to be careful. People will want to keep this hidden. We have to think about who we can trust." Clara nodded, her eyes serious. "I know, but we can't ignore it either. The truth belongs to everyone. The townspeople, the settlers, they deserve to know." The stars began to appear in the sky as they made their way back to Elias' cabin. The river flowed silently nearby, reflecting the twinkling lights above. Neither of them spoke much, but both felt the gravity of what they had discovered. The cave, the treasures, the documents, they were now the keepers of a secret that could change the course of the Wild West forever. When they arrived at the cabin, they laid out the maps, journals, and letters carefully, preparing to study them further. The fire had burned low, and the cabin was quiet except for the soft crackle of the embers. Elias poured them both a cup of tea, and they sat together, reviewing their findings. Every document, every map, and every letter told a story, revealing decades of hidden truths and forgotten histories. Clara looked up from the papers, her eyes reflecting both excitement and concern. "Elias, this is bigger than I imagined. We can't just keep it a secret. We have to find a way to show the townspeople to make sure this history is known." Elias nodded. "We will, but we have to be careful. Not everyone will want this exposed. Some people will try to stop us." The night deepened, and the cabin became a small island of light and knowledge in the vast darkness of the Wild West. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and the river whispered softly, as if acknowledging the importance of their discovery. Elias and Clara felt a sense of purpose, understanding that their lives had changed forever. What had begun as a simple river rescue had led them to uncover secrets that could reshape their world. As they finally prepared to rest, both felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Tomorrow would bring challenges, questions, and perhaps danger, but they were ready. Together, they had uncovered a hidden truth, and now they were entrusted with the power to reveal it. The cave had given them a glimpse into the past, but it was up to them to decide how that knowledge would shape the future. And as they drifted to sleep, the river flowed on, quietly guarding its secrets and whispering promises of adventure, discovery, and change. Elias and Clara, bound by courage, curiosity, and newfound responsibility, were ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that the coming days would test their strength, their wisdom, and their hearts. The next morning, the town of Ridge seemed ordinary at first glance. The sun rose slowly, painting the streets and buildings with warm, golden light, while the river shimmered quietly in the distance. But for Elias Harper and Clara Whitmore, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The discovery in the hidden cave weighed heavily on their minds. The documents, maps, and letters they had uncovered revealed a web of corruption and secrets that reached far beyond Ridge. The question that lingered in their thoughts was clear. Who could they trust to help them reveal the truth? Elias spent the early hours repairing a fence along the riverbank, trying to focus on simple tasks, but his mind was restless. Clara joined him after breakfast, carrying a bundle of papers and a notebook. They had decided to catalog and organize the information they had found in the cave. Every map, letter, and document had to be carefully recorded to ensure nothing was lost, and each piece of evidence needed to be understood. As they worked, Clara noticed something unusual. A group of men on horseback had entered the town from the east road. Their faces were stern and they moved with purpose, as if they were searching for something or someone. Clara felt a shiver of unease run down her spine. "Elias, do you see those men?" she whispered. Elias squinted toward the riders. "Yes, something about them doesn't feel right. They aren't just passing through." The two watched as the men dismounted near the center of town, speaking quietly among themselves. Their presence seemed deliberate, and both Elias and Clara realized that news of the cave, or at least of their search, may have already spread. The very thought that someone knew about their discovery filled them with both urgency and caution. "Clara," Elias said quietly, "we need a plan. If they're looking for the cave, we can't let them find it before we do something with the information. But we also can't confront them blindly." Clara nodded. "We'll need allies, people we trust in the town. And we'll have to be careful about how we move forward. If these men are connected to the landowners mentioned in the documents, they won't stop easily." They spent the rest of the morning speaking in hushed tones, deciding on their next steps. They identified a few townspeople who were honest, trustworthy, and concerned about the welfare of Ridge. Among them were the blacksmith, a woman who ran the general store, and a former teacher who had settled in the town years ago. Together, this small group could help plan how to protect the evidence and expose the truth. By late afternoon, Elias and Clara set out to warn these allies. They moved quietly through the town, using alleyways and side paths to avoid being seen by the men on horseback. When they reached the blacksmith, they found him working on a horseshoe, hammering it against the anvil. "Mr. Jenkins," Elias said in a low voice, "we need your help. Something serious has been discovered and we can't handle it alone." The blacksmith paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "What has happened?" he asked, noticing the urgency in Elias' eyes. Clara explained, carefully and concisely, about the cave, the hidden documents, and the potential for the information to reveal corruption that affected the town and surrounding region. Mr. Jenkins listened intently, nodding gravely as the story unfolded. "This is dangerous," he said finally. "Those men you saw, they're connected to powerful people. They won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to keep this quiet." Elias and Clara agreed. "That's why we need to act carefully. We can't confront them directly, but we can outsmart them. If we can get the information to the right people, the truth will come out, and they won't be able to stop it." With their plan set, Elias, Clara, and their small group of allies returned to the cabin to prepare. They packed the most important documents and maps in secure satchels and placed the treasures they could carry in sturdy crates. Every step required caution. They could not afford to be discovered by the men who were clearly tracking their movements. As night fell, the forest surrounding the cabin grew dark and quiet, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Elias and Clara decided to take turns keeping watch, ensuring that no one approached while the others rested. The tension was palpable, and neither of them could ignore the feeling that they were being observed, that every shadow in the night could hide a threat. Suddenly, A faint sound reached their ears, a snap of a branch, barely audible but distinct in the stillness. Elias immediately whispered, "Someone's coming." Clara grabbed the lantern, and together they moved to the edge of the clearing. Peering through the darkness, they saw a group of men advancing carefully, their intentions clear. These were the same riders from earlier, likely sent to find the cave and the evidence within it. Elias motioned for Clara to stay low, and he signaled the townspeople who were hidden nearby. They had prepared for this moment, setting traps and planning ways to mislead the intruders. Using ropes, loose rocks, and clever positioning, they managed to create a series of obstacles that slowed the men's progress. The men stumbled and cursed in frustration, giving Elias, Clara, and their allies a chance to move the most critical documents to a hidden spot in the forest. The night turned into a tense game of strategy. Elias and Clara led the intruders away from the cabin while their allies secured the evidence. Every step was deliberate, and every movement required careful thought. The sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the snapping of twigs, were amplified by the tension, making every moment feel like a battle of wits. Finally, after what felt like hours, the intruders gave up, unable to find what they were looking for. They retreated back toward the road, cursing their failure and unaware that Elias and Clara had already protected the most important evidence. Exhausted but relieved, the small group returned to the cabin to regroup. Clara sat down heavily, her hands trembling slightly. "That was too close," she whispered. "If they had found the cave..." Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We did the right thing. We protected the evidence and we outsmarted them, but we can't stop now. We have to take the next step, getting the information to people who can use it to make real change." They spent the remainder of the night planning how to share the documents safely. Letters were written, detailing what had been discovered and requesting the help of trusted officials in neighboring towns. Copies of maps and evidence were hidden in secure locations, ready to be delivered when the time was right. Every detail was carefully considered to ensure that those trying to maintain their power could not intercept or destroy the evidence. By dawn, the tension in the air had lessened slightly, replaced by a quiet determination. Elias and Clara knew that danger still lurked nearby, but they also understood that courage and careful planning could overcome it. The night had tested their bravery, their intelligence, and their trust in each other, but it had also strengthened the bond between them. As the first rays of sunlight illuminated the town, they looked toward the horizon. The river flowed steadily, the forest swayed gently in the morning breeze, and the town of Red Ridge was waking to another day, unaware of the dangers and discoveries that had taken place under its very nose. Elias and Clara felt a sense of purpose settle over them. They were no longer just ordinary townsfolk. They were guardians of truth, entrusted with the power to bring justice and change to their world. The day ahead would require courage, patience, and careful action. But for the first time, Elias and Clara felt ready. They had faced danger and come out stronger. They had outsmarted those who sought to hide the truth, and they were prepared to take the next steps toward exposing the corruption that had plagued the region for decades. And as they stood together on the riverbank, the wind carrying the soft murmur of the flowing water, both knew that the coming days would test them further. Yet they also understood that the night had proven one thing: ordinary people, acting with courage and intelligence, could change the course of history. The danger was real, but so was their determination. And with that determination, they were ready to face whatever challenges awaited, bringing light to secrets that had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. The sun rose over Red Ridge, bathing the town in a soft, golden light. The streets were quiet at first, the occasional clatter of a wagon or the neighing of a horse marking the start of another day. Yet for Elias Harper and Clara Whitmore, this morning felt different. The danger of the previous nights had not fully disappeared, but a sense of purpose and determination filled their hearts. They had survived the threats, protected the evidence, and now it was time to act, to ensure that the truth they had discovered in the hidden cave would finally reach those who needed to see it. Elias and Clara met early at the cabin, their expressions serious but hopeful. The maps, letters, and documents that had been carefully hidden were laid out before them, each item a key to exposing the corruption that had shaped the town and its surroundings for decades. The events of the past days, rescuing Clara from the river, discovering the cave, and outsmarting the men who tried to stop them, had brought them closer, creating a bond of trust and shared purpose. "We can't waste any time," Elias said, his voice steady. "We need to get this information to the right people today." Clara nodded, studying the maps one more time. "I've identified a few officials in neighboring towns who are known for honesty and fairness. If we deliver the documents to them, they can start investigations and ensure justice is done. But we must move carefully. There are still people who will try to stop us." They packed the most critical documents and treasures into secure satchels, ensuring that nothing could be lost or stolen. Then, with a small group of trusted townspeople, Mr. Jenkins the blacksmith, Mrs. Parker from the general store, and the former teacher, Mr. Allen, they set out toward the first neighboring town. Each step was cautious, avoiding main roads where they could be spotted by those who might still be watching. The journey was slow, but their determination gave them strength. As they traveled, Elias and Clara discussed the impact their discovery could have. The documents revealed illegal land claims, secret deals, and corruption that affected countless settlers. If made public, it could restore fairness to the towns, give rightful ownership to families who had been wronged, and remove the power of those who had exploited others for their gain. Both understood that their actions could change lives, and the responsibility weighed heavily on them. Late that afternoon, they arrived at the first neighboring town, a small but thriving settlement. Elias and Clara approached the town hall cautiously, aware that not everyone would welcome their arrival. They requested an audience with the town's officials, presenting the evidence and explaining what they had discovered. The officials were initially surprised, but as they reviewed the maps, letters, and documents, their expressions shifted from disbelief to determination. "This is remarkable," one of the officials said. "This evidence proves what many of us suspected but could not confirm. These documents will allow us to correct past wrongs and restore justice to the people affected." Elias and Clara felt a wave of relief. Their careful planning and courage were beginning to pay off. The officials promised to act immediately, starting investigations and taking steps to address the illegal land claims and corrupt dealings. Word would be sent to other towns and regions, ensuring that the truth could not be hidden any longer. As they left the town hall, Elias and Clara felt a sense of accomplishment, but they knew their work was not yet finished. There were more towns to visit, more officials to inform, and more evidence to secure. They traveled tirelessly over the next several days, always cautious, always alert, but increasingly hopeful. With each delivery of documents, they saw the beginnings of change, families reclaiming land, local leaders held accountable, and communities beginning to trust that fairness could prevail. Throughout their journey, Elias and Clara relied on each other. Their shared experiences, the river rescue, the discovery of the cave, and the dangerous encounters with those who sought to hide the truth, had forged a deep bond. They learned to anticipate each other's thoughts and actions, communicating with subtle gestures and quiet understanding. This partnership, built on trust and courage, became their greatest strength. By the time they returned to Red Ridge, the town had begun to change. News of their discoveries had spread, and the townspeople, inspired by the courage of Elias and Clara, were taking steps to ensure fairness and justice. Families who had been wronged were reclaiming property, and the influence of corrupt leaders was being challenged. The town felt renewed, a sense of hope and possibility replacing the fear and uncertainty that had once hung over it. Elias and Clara walked through the town, observing the changes. Children played freely in the streets, merchants conducted honest business, and neighbors spoke with trust and warmth. The river, once a place of danger for Clara, now symbolized the flow of truth and justice through the town. Elias paused for a moment, looking at the sparkling water, reflecting on how a single act of courage, the rescue, had set all of this into motion. Clara smiled as she watched Elias, understanding the depth of his thoughts. "We've done something important," she said softly. "Not just for ourselves, but for everyone in Ridge and beyond." Elias nodded. "It's been a long journey, but it's only the beginning. The work of justice doesn't end, but at least now, the people have the chance to build a better future." The town held a small gathering to honor Elias, Clara, and the others who had helped uncover the truth. While they were modest about the attention, the townspeople insisted, grateful for the bravery and determination that had brought change. Speeches were given, and words of thanks were offered, but the real celebration was in the renewed spirit of the community. People felt empowered, knowing that courage, honesty, and collaboration could overcome corruption and secrecy. As the celebration wound down and evening fell, Elias and Clara walked to the riverbank. The sky was painted in hues of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting on the flowing water below. They sat together quietly, feeling the weight of the journey and the hope for the future. "I never imagined that one moment falling into the river would lead to all of this," Clara said, her voice thoughtful. "It's amazing how life can change so suddenly." Elias smiled, taking her hand gently. "Sometimes the smallest acts, helping someone in need, standing up for what's right, can have the biggest impact. We were brave, but the real heroes are the people who will continue the work we've started." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "And we'll face it together," she whispered. The river flowed steadily, a quiet reminder of the events that had changed their lives and the town forever. The hidden cave, the documents, the dangers they had faced, all were part of a story that would be remembered for generations. But more importantly, Elias and Clara had proven that ordinary people, acting with courage and determination, could make a difference in the world. As night fell over Ridge, the town settled into a peaceful rhythm. Families rested safely in their homes, the river reflected the light of the stars above, and the once hidden truths were now a foundation for justice and fairness. Elias and Clara stayed at the riverbank a while longer, talking about their hopes for the future, their dreams for the town, and the adventures they might face next. By the time they returned to the cabin, a quiet sense of satisfaction had settled over them. They had faced danger, uncovered secrets, and inspired change, all while forming a bond that would last a lifetime. The challenges of the Wild West were far from over, but Elias and Clara knew they were stronger together, ready to face whatever came next. The river whispered softly in the night, carrying the memories of the past and the promise of the future. And in the hearts of Elias Harper and Clara Whitmore, there was a sense of hope, courage, and unshakable determination. They had saved lives, uncovered the truth, and transformed their world, proving that even in the Wild West, bravery, honesty, and compassion could light the darkest paths. As they finally rested, the stars above shone brightly, a reminder that every action, no matter how small, could ripple across time, shaping the future and changing lives. Elias and Clara, bound by courage, trust, and shared purpose, had completed a journey that began with a river rescue but ended in something far greater, a legacy of hope, justice, and the enduring power of doing what is right.